I'm Michael. I'm 34 years old, and my own parents took me to court for buying a house with my own money. Before I tell you about the one question the judge asked that made their entire case crumble into dust, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. The air in the courtroom was stale, thick with the smell of old paper, cheap floor polish, and a faint, underlying scent of human anxiety. It was so unnaturally quiet that every tiny sound was amplified. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the soft scratch of the court reporter's pen on her steno pad, the almost imperceptible rustle of fabric as my lawyer shifted in her chair. Each sound seemed to echo the frantic, panicked drumming of my own heart against my ribs. I sat ramrod straight, my back not even touching the hard wood of the chair. My hands were clasped together on the table in front of me, squeezed so tightly that my knuckles had turned bone white. Across the room, separated by a chasm of polished linoleum that felt miles wide, sat my family. My father, Henry, stared straight ahead, his jaw set in a look of grim determination. My mother, Eleanor, sat beside him, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, a perfect portrait of wronged motherhood. And next to her, my younger sister, Chloe, looking fragile and victimized. They wouldn't look at me, not once. It was a deliberate, practiced shunning, a performance for the judge. The whole scene felt utterly surreal, like a poorly written television drama I was trapped in. It was impossible to reconcile the sterile, hostile environment of this courtroom with the memory that kept flashing in my mind. A memory from just 1 month ago. A memory of pure, unadulterated joy. Let's go back. Rewind 30 days from this nightmare. The key was still warm in my hand from the lawyer's handshake. It felt impossibly heavy. A solid chunk of brass that represented 13 years of my life. 13 years of waking up before dawn for an early shift. 13 years of coming home late from a second job, exhausted to the bone. 13 years of cheap coffee, second-hand cars, and saying no to things I desperately wanted so I could say yes to this. The key to my own front door. I remember standing on the porch of the small, blue house, the afternoon sun feeling like a blessing on my skin. It wasn't a palace. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch, the kind you see in any suburb across America. But it was all mine. Every nail, every floorboard, every blade of grass in the slightly overgrown backyard. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing in a way that sounded not like emptiness, but like possibility. I ran my hand along the cool laminate of the kitchen countertop, imagining the simple act of making coffee in the morning, a ritual that would be entirely my own. For the first time since I'd left their house at 18, I felt a profound, bone-deep sense of peace, of security. I had built these walls around me, not with lumber and drywall, but with sheer, relentless effort. This was my sanctuary, a place where I could finally be safe. At least, that's what I believed for a few precious hours. That evening, as I was tearing open the first cardboard box, filled with nothing more than a few old books and a chipped coffee mug, my phone buzzed. A text message. It was from my dad. It didn't say, "Congratulations, son. We're so proud." It didn't ask for pictures. It was 6 cold words. "We need to talk about the house." My stomach plummeted. The peace I'd felt just moments before evaporated, replaced by a familiar, icy dread. I knew that tone even in a text message. I leaned against the bare, freshly painted wall of my new dining room, took a shaky breath, and made the call that would ignite a war. That was the beginning of the end of my family, and the true beginning of my fight for a life of my own. That first day, before the text message that poisoned everything, was one of the best of my life. The closing itself was an out-of-body experience. I sat in a sterile conference room across from Mrs. Gable, the title company's lawyer. She had a kind, crinkly smile and patiently walked me through a stack of documents that seemed a foot high. I signed my name, Michael Keller, over and over again. Signature after signature, initial after initial. My hands started to ache, but I didn't care. With every stroke of the pen, the reality of it sank in a little deeper. I am a homeowner. This is real. When the last page was signed, She gathered the documents into a neat pile, squared them on her desk, and pushed a single, shiny brass key across the polished wood toward me. "Congratulations, Mr. Keller," she said, her smile genuine. "She's all yours." A lump formed in my throat, thick and hot. All I could do was nod, unable to form words. I shook her offered hand, the key pressing into my palm. I practically floated out of that office building and into the parking lot. I got into my car, a 10-year-old sedan with a cracked dashboard and a radio that only worked intermittently. I didn't even turn it on. I just sat there, in the driver's seat, and opened my hand. I stared at the key. It wasn't just metal. It was a symbol. It was proof that all the sacrifices, all the lonely nights, all the grueling hours had meant something. I drove to the house, probably a little too fast. I pulled into the driveway, my driveway, and killed the engine. For a full 5 minutes, I just sat there, looking at my house, my home. The blue paint on the shutters was a little chipped. A crack snaked across the concrete walkway to the front porch. A rose bush near the window was a tangled mess of thorns and a few sad-looking buds. It was flawed. It was imperfect. And I loved it with an intensity that surprised me. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and the faint, clean scent of the previous owner's cleaning supplies. Sunlight poured through the large picture window in the living room, illuminating millions of tiny dust motes dancing in the air like tiny fairies. I dropped my briefcase and walked slowly through the space. This room, the big one at the front, would be the living room. I could already picture a comfortable couch, a coffee table, a TV. The small room off the hallway, the one overlooking the backyard, that would be my office. As a cybersecurity analyst who worked primarily from home, having a dedicated space that wasn't also my bedroom was a dream I'd held for years. No more taking conference calls from my tiny kitchen table. I walked into the master bedroom. It had its own small, attached bathroom with a stand-up shower. For the first time in my 34 years of life, I would not have to share a bathroom. The thought was so luxurious it almost made me laugh out loud. As I stood there, in the quiet sunlight, my mind replayed a montage of the last 13 years. I saw myself at 21, working a double shift at a pizza place, my feet aching, my clothes smelling of grease and burnt cheese. I remembered getting home at 2 a.m., too tired to even shower, and logging into my online banking app to transfer the day's cash tips, a crumpled wad of $73, into my savings account, labeled House Fund. I saw myself at 25, sitting in my cramped apartment, eating a bowl of instant ramen while studying for a certification exam that I hoped would land me a better-paying job. I'd used my library card to get the textbook because I couldn't afford to buy it. I saw myself just last year, selling my small collection of vintage video games, my one real hobby, to a collector to add another $1,000 to my down payment. Every decision, big and small, had been filtered through one question. Will this get me closer to the house? I never once considered asking my parents for help. I knew it was pointless. Their resources, financial, emotional, their very attention, were a river that flowed in only one direction, toward my sister, Chloe. She was the golden child, the sensitive artist, who needed to be shielded from the harsh realities of the world. I was just Michael, dependable, resourceful Michael, the one who would always figure it out on his own. Standing in my empty living room, the weight of that long-held resentment seemed to lift for the first time. It didn't matter anymore. The struggle was over. I had won. I had done it all by myself. This victory was pure, untainted by obligation or anyone else's help. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, letting the sun warm my back through the window. I closed my eyes and just breathed. The silence wasn't lonely. It was the sound of peace, the sound of a new beginning. And then my phone buzzed with that text. And the beautiful silence was shattered into a million pieces. My thumb hovered over the green call icon next to my dad's name. A voice in my head, the weary, cynical voice of experience, screamed at me to just ignore it, to turn the phone off, to give myself one night, just one single night, of untainted happiness in my new home. But another part of me, a younger, more foolish part that never seemed to learn, still craved their approval. A pathetic little flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. I pressed the button. "Hey, Dad," I said, forcing a lightness into my voice that I didn't feel. "Got your text." I was just starting to unpack. "Michael," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any warmth or excitement for me. It was his all-business tone. "Your mother wants to be in on this. I'm putting you on speakerphone." I heard the fumbling sound of the phone being placed on a table. Then my mother's voice, equally chilly, cut through the line. "Michael, are you there?" "Yeah, Mom, I'm here. What's going on?" I leaned against the wall, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. There was a pregnant pause. I could vividly picture them in their living room, sitting side by side on their beige sofa, exchanging a silent, meaningful look, deciding who would be the one to deliver the blow. My father, as usual, took the lead. "Son," he began, and my stomach clenched. He reserved the word son for moments when he was about to lecture me or deliver bad news. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of talking. About the house." "Okay," I said slowly, my guard now fully up. "What about it?" "We've discussed it at length," he continued, his voice taking on a formal, almost rehearsed quality. "And we've come to a decision. We think it would be fairer, all things considered, if Chloe had the house." The words didn't register at first. They were so fundamentally absurd, so completely disconnected from reality, that my brain simply refused to process them. It was like he had started speaking in a foreign language. "What?" The word came out as a strangled whisper. I thought it had to be a joke. A terrible, cruel, unfunny joke. "What are you talking about?" "Now, just listen for a minute, Michael." My mother chimed in, her voice adopting that sickly sweet, placating tone she always used when she was about to manipulate someone. "You have to understand the position your sister is in. You know how much student loan debt she has from that private art school. It's a crushing amount. She's trying so hard to start her career, but the world is just so cruel to creatives. It's giving her terrible anxiety. And you're doing so well, Michael," my father added, framing my success as a negative. "You have that wonderful, stable job in technology. You make a good salary. For you, saving up and buying another house in a few years would be no trouble at all. But for Chloe, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. She can't do it on her own." The floor felt like it was tilting beneath me. I slid down the wall until I was sitting, the phone pressed hard against my ear, as if proximity could somehow make their words make sense. They were serious. This wasn't a joke. This was a demand. It's not your house to give away," I stammered, my voice trembling. "I bought it. I saved for 13 years. My name, and only my name, is on the deed and all the legal papers." "We're not talking about legalities, Michael," my father said, his voice hardening with impatience. "We're talking about what's right. We're talking about family. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. We fed you. We clothed you. We gave you the foundation for your success. It's time you give something back to this family." That's when the numbness began to recede, replaced by a hot, volcanic surge of rage. "Give back? I've been completely on my own since the day I turned 18. I paid for my own car, my own community college, every single thing I own." "Oh, don't be so dramatic and ungrateful," my mother snapped, her placating tone gone, replaced by venom. "We did the best we could for you. Now we're simply asking you to do the right thing for your sister. She needs this house. Her mental health depends on it. It would be incredibly selfish of you to hold onto it when her need is so much greater than your want." Selfish. The word echoed in the empty room. They were calling me selfish. After 13 years of self-denial, of working myself into the ground, of sacrificing every small luxury, my desire to keep the one thing I had ever truly earned for myself was being labeled as selfish. "You have a moral obligation to this family, Michael." My father's voice boomed through the phone. "Chloe is your blood. It is your duty to help her when she is struggling." "My duty?" I was shouting now, my voice raw. "My duty is to the bank that holds the loan on the house that I bought." "The answer is no. Are you insane?" The answer is, and will always be, no. The line went dead silent for a terrifying moment. Then my mother's voice came back, low, cold, and dripping with menace. We'll see about that, Michael. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life. Click. They hung up. I sat there in the ringing silence, the phone still clutched in my hand. The beautiful, sunlit house suddenly felt like a crime scene. The dream had curdled into a nightmare. They had just declared war on me, and the battlefield was my own home. The click of the disconnected call was a sound of finality. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on a relationship I hadn't even realized was on its last hinges. For a long, long time, I just sat on the hardwood floor, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. The fiery rage of the conversation cooled, leaving behind a familiar, cavernous ache. It was the ghost of 1,000 past hurts, all rushing back to haunt the rooms of my new house. My mind, against my will, became a movie projector, flashing scenes from my life onto the bare walls. I'm 16 years old. All my friends are getting their driver's licenses and, with them, a taste of freedom. My dad, Henry, sits me down at the kitchen table. If you want a car, you earn it, he says, not unkindly, but as a statement of fact. So I do. I get a job bussing tables at a greasy spoon diner on the highway. My life becomes a cycle of school, homework, and the smell of stale coffee and fried onions. Every paycheck, minus the rent I now have to pay my parents, goes into a coffee can in my closet. After 6 months of missed parties and long nights, I have $900. I buy a beat-up, rust-colored Honda Civic from a guy in a parking lot. I'm bursting with pride. I pull into my own driveway, my first real asset. My dad comes out, takes one look at it, and says, "Don't park that piece of junk where the neighbors can see it. Put it on the street." The pride shrivels inside me. I'm 18, a week after high school graduation. My parents are buzzing with excitement, but not for me. They're deep in the planning stages for Chloe's 16th birthday party, which is still a year away. We have to book the country club a year out, or we'll never get it. My mother explains, shuffling through brochures for caterers. That evening, my father informs me, "It's time you start paying your own way in the world, Michael." It's not a suggestion. It's an eviction notice. 2 weeks later, I'm moving my few belongings into a cramped, dingy apartment with a friend from school. There's no graduation party for me, no celebration of my milestone. My transition into adulthood is a transaction. I'm 20, a sophomore at community college. I'm working 30 hours a week stocking shelves at a grocery store on the graveyard shift to pay my tuition. One semester, I'm taking an advanced programming course, the class that I know could be my ticket to a real internship, a real career. But the required textbook is a new edition, and it costs $120. For me, at that time, it might as well have been $1 million. My rent is due, my rust bucket Honda needs new tires, and I've been living on pasta and ketchup for a week. Swallowing every ounce of my pride, I draft an email to my mother. I rewrite it a dozen times, trying to make it sound casual, like it's no big deal. Subject: quick question. Hi Mom. Hope you and Dad are doing well. My semester is off to a great start. There's a textbook I need for my advanced coding class, and it's a bit more expensive than I anticipated. It's $120. I was wondering if there was any chance you could help me out. I can pay you back right after my next paycheck on the 1st. Love, Michael. I check my email obsessively for 2 days, my stomach churning with anxiety and shame. Finally, her reply appears. It is brutally short. Subject: quick question, Michael. Your father and I are focusing our financial support on Chloe right now. Her private art lessons and the materials for her portfolio are very expensive. You've always been so resourceful. We're sure you'll figure something out. Mom. Resourceful. Their code word for on your own. I remember sitting there in the harsh fluorescent light of the college computer lab, the screen blurring as tears of humiliation stung my eyes. I didn't get angry. I just felt a profound sense of finality. I deleted the email chain, left the lab, and went straight to a plasma donation center I'd seen a flyer for. I sold my plasma twice that week. I got the book. I aced the class. I got the internship. and I never, ever asked them for another thing. Sitting here now in my house, the house that was built on a foundation of resourcefulness they forced upon me, that old wound felt as fresh as if it had been inflicted yesterday. This wasn't just about a building. This was about that 16-year-old boy being told his accomplishment was an eyesore. It was about that 18-year-old being pushed out of the nest with no safety net. It was about that 20-year-old who had to sell his own blood to buy a textbook while his sister's potential was being funded without question. This house was my vindication. It was the closing statement in a long, silent argument I'd been having with them my whole life. And now, they wanted to rip it out of my hands and give it to the very person for whom I had always been sacrificed. For 7 days, the silence from my parents was a living entity. It filled my new house, making every room feel cold and unwelcoming. I tried to go about the business of moving in, unpacking boxes, assembling cheap flat-pack furniture. But a sense of impending doom hung over me, a dark cloud that blocked out the sun. Every time a car slowed down on my street, my heart would leap into my throat. Every unexpected noise made me jump. I was a prisoner in my own home, waiting for an attack I knew was coming. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, not with a bang, but with a polite knock on the door. It was a certified mail carrier, a man with a bored expression who held out a clipboard and a crisp, white, business-sized envelope. "Need a signature for this, sir." My hand was shaking so badly I could barely sign my name. As soon as I closed the door, I leaned against it, the envelope feeling like a lead weight in my hand. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. I knew, with a sickening certainty, what it was. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. My eyes scanned the first page, my brain struggling to decode the dense, intimidating legalese. But some words jumped out, sharp and clear as shards of glass. Superior Court of the State. Summons and complaint for damages. Plaintiff: Henry Keller and Eleanor Keller. Defendant: Michael Keller. I sank into a half-assembled kitchen chair, the papers rattling in my hand. I forced myself to read the complaint. It was a document of such breathtaking delusion, such masterful fiction, that it felt like it had been written in an alternate reality. They were suing me. My own parents were suing me. The charge was failure to repay familial debt relief. It was a term I'd never heard before, because, as I would later learn from my own lawyer, it didn't actually exist. They had invented it. Their lawyer had crafted a narrative arguing that their parental support, the food, shelter, and clothing they provided me for my first 18 years, was not a gift or a duty, but a long-term, interest-free loan, a familial investment they were now choosing to call in. They had calculated the value of this investment down to the dollar. The total they were demanding was an astonishingly specific figure: $289,300. The list of demands was even more insane. First, I was to immediately sign over the deed of the house at 123 Oak Street to my sister, Chloe Keller. Second, as a form of repayment for their investment, I was to continue making all mortgage payments on the property until the loan was paid in full. They seemed to have a fundamental misunderstanding of how a mortgage works, that it's a contract between me and a financial institution, not a family piggy bank. Third, they were seeking additional monetary damages for the severe emotional distress and anxiety my callous and ungrateful refusal to cooperate had caused them. I read the document 3 times, and with each reading, the initial shock gave way to a cold, hard rage unlike anything I had ever felt before. This was not a desperate plea from struggling parents. This was a premeditated, calculated act of war. They had sat in a lawyer's office, 2 people in their late 50s, and conspired to financially and emotionally ruin their own son. They weren't just trying to take my house. They were trying to annihilate my life, to trap me in a decade-long cycle of debt for a home I wouldn't even live in. A strange, terrifying calm washed over me. The shaking stopped. My breathing evened out. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. There would be no more arguments, no more pleading, no more family discussions. This was a legal matter now. I stood up, walked over to my laptop, and opened it. I typed, "Best family law attorneys near me," into the search bar. I spent the next hour reading reviews, looking for a fighter. I found a woman, a Ms. Miller, whose reviews consistently described her as a shark and unflappable. She was perfect. I picked up my phone and dialed her office. When the receptionist answered, my voice was steady and clear, without a hint of the turmoil raging inside me. "Yes, hello?" I said. "I need to schedule an emergency consultation with Ms. Miller. My parents are suing me for the house I just bought." The days immediately following the lawsuit's arrival were a frantic blur of damage control and strategic planning. My first meeting with Ms. Miller took place in her sleek, minimalist office. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a haircut that looked like it cost more than my first car. She listened to my entire story without interruption, her face a mask of professional neutrality. When I finished, I pushed the lawsuit across her glass desk. She read through it, her expression slowly shifting from neutral to one of sheer, clinical disbelief. She looked up at me, a single eyebrow raised. "Mr. Keller," she said, her voice calm and precise. "In my 15 years of practicing family law, I have seen some truly audacious claims. This is a masterpiece. Familial debt relief is not a legal principle. It's a fantasy. It's what happens when extreme entitlement gets a law degree." Her confidence was a balm on my frayed nerves. She assured me their case had almost no chance of succeeding in court. "But," she warned, her eyes serious, "that doesn't mean they can't make your life hell for the next 6 to 12 months. Their goal here isn't necessarily to win. It's to break you, to bleed you dry with legal fees and emotional stress until you give in. You need to be prepared for a war of attrition." "I'm prepared," I told her, and I meant it. I spent the rest of the week on a mission, a scavenger hunt through my own past. I unearthed 13 years of my life from dusty boxes in my garage. I compiled every bank statement, every pay stub from every job, every tax return. I was creating a mountain of evidence, a paper trail that proved, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that every single penny that went into my house had come from my own labor. The work was a welcome distraction, but the nights were brutal. I'd lie awake in my bed, in this house that was supposed to be my sanctuary, and feel like an imposter. The legal battle tainted every room. I'd stare at the ceiling, my mind racing, replaying every cruel word from that phone call, every insulting line from their complaint. How did a family get here? It was during one of those long, dark nights, around 2 in the morning, that my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from my best friend, Jonathan. He was one of the few people I'd told the whole sordid story to. The text wasn't words. It was a screenshot from Instagram. It was a post from my sister, Chloe. The photo showed her, beaming, standing in a chic, overpriced furniture store. She was posing with her hand resting proprietorially on the arm of a stylish velvet sofa. But it was the caption that made my blood turn to ice in my veins. It read, "Making big decisions for the new place. Sparkles can't wait to make this house a home. So incredibly grateful to my amazing family for fighting for what's right and making my dreams come true. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag family first, hashtag manifesting." My eyes scanned the photo again, and then I saw it. The detail that pushed it from merely insulting to truly diabolical. In the background of the furniture showroom, on a large screen displaying stock images, was a picture of a charming blue ranch-style house. My house. She had either found the original real estate listing photo online or had driven by and taken one herself. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't just my parents' crazy scheme that she was passively going along with. This was a coordinated effort. She was an active, enthusiastic co-conspirator. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was stunning. She was so confident, so certain of her victory, that she was already decorating her spoils of war online. The hashtags were like tiny, poisoned daggers. Hashtag family first. The irony was suffocating. This was the first real twist in the emotional knife. It proved this wasn't just about her need. It was about her want, her desire, her unshakable belief that she was entitled to the fruits of my labor. In the narrative she and my parents had constructed, she was the princess being rescued, and I was the dragon hoarding treasure that rightfully belonged to her. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was with pure, unadulterated rage. I screenshotted her post myself, and then I went to her profile and screenshotted the dozens of gushing comments from her friends. OMG, I'm so jealous. You deserve it. Can't wait for the housewarming. I forwarded everything to Ms. Miller with a one-line email. You wanted proof of their mindset. Here it is. Her reply came back in less than 5 minutes, despite the late hour. Well, Chloe Keller just became our star witness. Thank you for this. That night, for the first time since this all began, I slept soundly. The hurt was still there, but it had been overshadowed by a cold, hard resolve. This was no longer just a defense. This was a prosecution, and I had just been handed my first piece of evidence to nail them to the wall. The news of the lawsuit rippled through our extended family like a shockwave. My parents, never ones for subtlety, had launched a preemptive strike. They had called every aunt, uncle, and cousin, weaving a tragic tale of their selfless sacrifice for their 2 children, and how one of them, the cold, successful one, had turned his back on them and his poor, struggling sister. The first few days, my phone was a constant source of misery. Calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all of them eager to dispense their second-hand wisdom and judgment. The most venomous was my Aunt Diana, my mother's younger sister and chief enabler. Michael, I just want you to know that I am absolutely disgusted by your behavior, she began, without even a hello. Your parents are saints. They gave you everything, and now you're putting them through this hell, making them spend their retirement money on lawyers, all because you can't be bothered to help your own sister. Aunt Diana, did they tell you I saved for 13 years to buy this house? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Did they tell you that I paid for it with my own money? They told me you wouldn't have had the opportunity to earn that money without the stable home they provided. She shot back, parroting their talking points perfectly. You owe them. You owe your sister. Family is supposed to come first, Michael, a concept you clearly don't understand. I didn't argue. I just said, okay, Aunt Diana, and hung up the phone. Arguing with a brick wall was a better use of my time. For about a week, it felt like the entire family had turned against me. The family group chat on WhatsApp, normally a cheerful stream of baby pictures and vacation photos, fell ominously silent. I was an outcast, a pariah. Then, one Thursday evening, the group chat exploded. My cousin Matthew, who was my age and had grown up witnessing the family's toxic dynamics firsthand, had clearly had enough. He unleashed a digital tirade. His message, sent to the entire family, read, okay, I've kept my mouth shut for a week, and I can't do it anymore. Uncle Henry, Aunt Eleanor, what is wrong with you? Suing your own son? I was there. I remember Michael working the night shift at the grocery store to pay for his college classes while you were writing checks for Chloe's $50,000 a year private art school. I remember him driving that rusted-out Honda for 10 years. I remember him missing my own wedding because he couldn't afford the flight. And now you want to take the one thing he ever built for himself. This is the most shameful thing I have ever seen. It was like a dam breaking. Suddenly, other cousins started chiming in. Wait, is that true about the textbook? One asked. I always wondered why Michael never came on the family vacations. Another added. The unified front my parents had tried to create was fracturing before my eyes. The biggest shock, however, came later that night. A call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct made me answer. Michael! The voice was gravelly and old, but it held an authority that was unmistakable. Grandpa Arthur? I was floored. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was a stoic, hard-working man I respected immensely but barely knew. My parents had always kept us at a distance, with a rotating list of excuses. He was busy, he was traveling, he wasn't feeling well. I just got off the phone with your father, he said, his voice tight with anger. Or rather, he hung up on me. I told him he's a damn fool and a disgrace to the Keller name. What he is doing to you is a sin. Tears pricked my eyes. I was so stunned, I couldn't speak. Now you listen to me, boy, he continued, his voice softening slightly. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You're the only one of his children who learned the value of hard work. That house is yours. You earned it fair and square. He succeeded in spite of you, not because of you. That's what I told your father. Thank you, Grandpa. I finally managed to choke out. You have no idea how much that means to me. I know we haven't been close, Michael, he said, and for the first time, I heard a note of regret in his voice. There are reasons for that, reasons we can talk about later. But I want you to know, I'm on your side. 100%. You fight them. Don't you dare give in. If you need money for your lawyer, you call me. You understand. I understand, I said, a wave of relief and gratitude washing over me. When I hung up, the oppressive weight of isolation I'd been carrying for weeks had lifted. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. This unexpected phone call was the second twist, a sign that the truth had a way of fighting its way to the surface. A line had been drawn, and now I had powerful allies on my side of it. The thought gave me a strength I hadn't realized I was missing. The month leading up to the preliminary court hearing was the most surreal and stressful of my life. My house, which was supposed to be a place of peace, became a war room. My dining table was perpetually covered in stacks of documents, legal pads, and empty coffee mugs. My life became a tightly scheduled regimen of work, meetings with Ms. Miller, and sleepless nights spent organizing the evidence of my own existence. Ms. Miller was my anchor in this storm. She was methodical, pragmatic, and completely immune to the emotional chaos my family was trying to create. They are playing a game of emotional terrorism, Michael, she told me during one of our strategy sessions. They want you to get angry, to get sad, to get exhausted. They want you to make a mistake. We will not give them that satisfaction. We will be calm, we will be prepared, and we will let the facts do the fighting. And the facts were overwhelmingly on our side. We assembled a massive 3-ring binder, which we jokingly called the Book of Michael. It was a comprehensive chronological history of my financial life since I was 18. It contained every pay stub from my early jobs, proving my income. It had every bank statement, with deposits and transfers to my house fund, savings account highlighted. It had my community college transcripts, along with the receipts for every tuition payment I had made myself. We included the printout of the infamous textbook email, a small but devastating piece of evidence that directly contradicted their sworn statement of providing unwavering financial and emotional support. We dedicated an entire section to Chloe. It included her Instagram post, the fawning comments, and even a detailed breakdown of her known expenses that my parents had covered over the years: private school tuition, a new car for her high school graduation, rent for her trendy apartment. We weren't trying to shame her. We were establishing a clear, undeniable pattern of financial favoritism. My friend Jonathan was my lifeline. He'd come over most nights, often with takeout, and just sit with me while I worked. He wouldn't offer empty platitudes. He would just be there, a quiet, steady presence that reminded me I still had a family, even if it wasn't one related by blood. You know what the craziest part is? I said to him one night, staring at a bank statement from 2009. I think they actually believe their own lies. I think in their minds they really are the victims here. Of course they do, Jonathan said, not looking up from his phone. People who build their world on a foundation of lies have to believe them, or the whole thing comes crashing down. You buying this house was an earthquake they weren't prepared for. He was right. This house was a disruption to their carefully curated reality. In the midst of this personal chaos, I had to maintain my professional life. I was worried the stress would affect my performance at work, so I decided to be upfront with my boss, a man named Mr. Grayson. He was a tough but fair director who valued results above all else. I asked for a private meeting and laid out a brief, professional version of the situation, assuring him it would not interfere with my duties. His response floored me. He listened intently, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Michael, he said, your personal life is your own business, but your professional life is my business. And professionally, you are one of the most reliable and resourceful analysts we have. You single-handedly rebuilt our threat detection protocol last quarter. You didn't ask for help, you just got it done. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." He then did something extraordinary. He offered to write a formal letter of character reference for the court. In it, he detailed my work ethic, my integrity, my career progression, and my most recent promotion to a senior analyst position, which came with a significant salary increase. "Maybe the judge would be interested to know what kind of man they're dealing with," he said with a wry smile. Ms. Miller was thrilled. It wasn't direct evidence for the case, but it was powerful ammunition against their portrayal of me as some kind of ungrateful dependent. The most powerful weapon in our arsenal, however, remained a secret known only to me and Ms. Miller. It was the final settlement statement from the house purchase. It showed the total amount I had saved, a number far larger than anyone suspected, and the record of a single wire transfer to the title company for the full purchase price of the home. During our final meeting before the court date, Ms. Miller tapped the document with her pen. "Their entire case, flimsy as it is, rests on the assumption that you are burdened by a massive mortgage," she said, a glint in her eye. "They see you as being in debt, just like them, just like your sister. They have no idea about your real financial situation. Do they?" "None," I confirmed. "They never asked. They just assumed." "Excellent," she said, a slow, confident smile spreading across her face. "We are going to let them walk right into that assumption. We let their lawyer build his entire argument on it. And then, at the perfect moment, we are going to pull the rug out from under him. This is our checkmate." Walking out of her office that day, I felt a strange sense of calm descend upon me. The fear and anxiety were still there, buzzing under the surface. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of anticipation. I was ready. My parents had started this war based on a fantasy. I was about to end it with the cold, hard, undeniable truth. The morning of the hearing was gray and drizzly, the sky a perfect reflection of the churning anxiety in my stomach. I put on the navy blue suit I had bought years ago for a job interview. It felt less like clothing and more like a suit of armor. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I saw a stranger. His eyes were tired, shadowed with stress, but there was a hardness in his jaw that I didn't recognize. He looked like a man ready for a fight. I walked into the courthouse alone, my leather briefcase containing the Book of Michael clutched in my hand. And then I saw them, my family. They were huddled together in a small, tight circle near the entrance to our designated courtroom. My father, my mother, Chloe, and my Aunt Diana. They were a unified front of manufactured victimhood. And, in a move of such spectacular tackiness that I almost laughed out loud, they were all wearing matching white t-shirts. Printed across the chest of each shirt, in big, black, block letters, were the words, "Family comes first." The hypocrisy was so profound, so utterly shameless, that it defied belief. They had turned this deeply personal, painful destruction of our family into a branding opportunity, a slogan for their delusion. They looked like a bizarre cult. Chloe caught my eye for a fleeting second. There was no flicker of doubt or remorse in her gaze, only a cold, triumphant certainty. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk before turning away. That single look confirmed everything. She was not a reluctant pawn. She was a willing and eager participant. Ms. Miller met me just inside the courtroom doors. She took one look at my family's uniforms and let out a soft, almost inaudible sigh. "Well," she whispered to me, "they're certainly committing to the narrative. Deep breaths, Michael. Don't engage. Don't even look at them. They are nothing but background noise." We took our seats at the defendant's table. The courtroom was smaller and more mundane than I had imagined from movies. The judge was an older woman, Judge Davis, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an expression of profound weariness, the look of a person who had seen and heard every possible permutation of human greed and folly. My parents' lawyer, a man named Mr. Davies, went first. He was exactly the type of lawyer you'd expect them to hire. Slick, with an expensive suit, an overly tan complexion, and a voice that oozed a false, folksy sincerity. He began by painting a heart-wrenching portrait of Henry and Eleanor Keller, two hard-working, salt-of-the-earth parents who had sacrificed everything for their children. He spoke of their modest retirement fund, which was now being tragically depleted by this unfortunate but necessary legal action. He gestured toward me, describing me as a gifted young man who had found immense success in the lucrative world of high technology. He argued that this success would have been impossible without the foundational investment made by his clients. The food on his table, the roof over his head, the clothes on his back for 18 years, that was their investment, he declared, his voice ringing with passion. They are not asking for a handout, Your Honor. They are simply asking for a small return on their lifelong investment, a way to ensure that their other child, the artist, the dreamer, has the same stable footing that they provided for him. Then he called Chloe to the stand. She was a vision of artistic fragility, dressed in a long, flowing skirt and a vintage blouse. She spoke in a soft, breathy voice, clutching a crumpled tissue in her hand. She talked about her crippling student loan debt, a direct result of pursuing her passion for art history, a passion her parents had always encouraged. She spoke of her dreams of turning the house, my house, into a community-based healing space for struggling creatives. She never once looked at me. She looked at the judge, her eyes wide and pleading. I sat there, my hands clenched into fists under the table, my jaw aching from grinding my teeth. I listened to them weave their tapestry of lies, a narrative so complete and convincing that for a terrifying second, I almost doubted my own reality. They had erased me. They had erased my 13 years of relentless work, my sacrifices, my struggle. They had replaced it all with a simple, clean story of their benevolence and my ingratitude. But I held on to Ms. Miller's words. Let them build their case. Let them build it high. I just had to wait for my turn to knock it all down. When Mr. Davies finally finished his dramatic presentation, Judge Davis turned her tired eyes to our table. Ms. Miller, your response? Ms. Miller stood up, her movements calm and deliberate. She was the absolute antithesis of their lawyer. No theatrics, no emotional appeals. Just cold, hard facts. Your Honor, she began, her voice crisp and professional, cutting through the sentimental fog their lawyer had created. We are not here today to debate the definition of family or to quantify the value of parental support. We are here to ascertain the legal ownership of a piece of real estate located at 123 Oak Street. She walked to the clerk and submitted our binder of evidence. What you will find in this binder, Your Honor, is a meticulously documented financial history. It shows that my client, Mr. Michael Keller, has been financially independent since the age of 18. It shows 13 years of consistent employment and disciplined saving. She systematically dismantled their entire narrative, piece by piece. She presented the pay stubs from my pizza delivery job. She showed the bank statements with their highlighted transfers to my savings account. She presented my tuition receipts. Then, she projected the email from my mother onto the courtroom screen, the one refusing me $120 for a textbook. A collective murmur went through the few observers in the gallery. This email, Ms. Miller said, her voice even, was sent during the same calendar year that the plaintiffs were paying over $50,000 for their daughter's private art school tuition. This is not to denigrate Ms. Keller's education, but simply to establish a clear and long-standing pattern regarding the plaintiff's allocation of financial resources. My parents' lawyer leaped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant and designed to prejudice the court. Judge Davis just glared at him over the top of her glasses. Objection overruled, Mr. Davies. It speaks directly to your client's sworn claims of providing equitable support. Sit down. He sat down, his face a mask of fury. My father was turning a deep shade of crimson. My mother was whispering frantically to Aunt Diana. Chloe had abandoned her fragile artist persona and was now staring at me with undisguised venom. Ms. Miller concluded her presentation. As the evidence clearly shows, Your Honor, my client is the sole, legal, and financial owner of this property. The plaintiffs have no legal claim to it whatsoever. Their case is without merit. The judge leaned back in her high-backed chair, steepling her fingers. She looked over all the documents, then at my parents' lawyer, and finally, she settled her sharp gaze on my father. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. This was the moment. Then, she leaned forward into her microphone. Her voice was deceptively mild. "Mr. Keller," she said, addressing my father directly, "your complaint is predicated on the idea of fairness. You wish for your son to give the house to your daughter, and for him to continue paying all the associated costs, because you believe he is in a better financial position to do so. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," my father said, puffing out his chest. He thought he was winning. "So, to that end," the judge continued, her eyes narrowing slightly, "tell me, Mr. Keller, are you aware of what the monthly mortgage payment is on this house?" It was the question. The simple, brilliant question that was the linchpin of our entire strategy. A smug, self-satisfied smile crept across my father's face. He saw the question as an opportunity to highlight my financial success and the reasonableness of their request. "I believe the mortgage is in the range of $2,000 a month, Your Honor," he said with confidence. It's a substantial amount, of course, which is precisely why Michael, with his large salary from his tech job, is the only one who can possibly handle such a burden for his sister. The judge nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. She turned her gaze from my father to my lawyer. "Ms. Miller." Ms. Miller stood. She didn't look at my father or his lawyer. She looked directly at Judge Davis. She let the silence stretch for a beat, drawing all the air out of the room. Then she delivered the final, fatal blow. "There is no mortgage, Your Honor." The words landed with the force of a physical impact. The court reporter's fingers froze over her keys. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Davies, literally took a step back, his mouth falling open. Ms. Miller's voice was steady and clear as she drove the point home. "My client, Mr. Michael Keller, purchased the house outright. He paid for it in full at closing with his own liquid savings. Complete and utter silence. You could have heard a feather drop. And in that silence, I watched the entire universe my family had constructed implode. My father, Henry, went pale, his face slack with shock. My mother, Eleanor, had her hand clamped over her mouth, her eyes wide with a horrified mixture of disbelief and, I thought, a flash of avarice. And Chloe just stared, her face a perfect, frozen mask of utter bewilderment. Their entire case, their entire narrative of my supposed wealth and their daughter's supposed need, had been built on a foundation of sand, and the truth had just washed it all away. Judge Davis stared at my father for a long, 10-second eternity. Then, she slammed her gavel down, the sharp crack echoing through the stunned courtroom. "Case dismissed," she declared, her voice dripping with contempt, "for a complete and utter lack of legal merit. Mr. Davies, I suggest you advise your clients to never waste this court's time with such frivolous nonsense again." And just like that, it was over. Walking out of that courthouse was like surfacing after being held underwater for too long. The drizzly morning had given way to a weak, watery sunlight. I didn't look back at them. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the quiet stairwell. I didn't feel the triumphant elation I had expected. I just felt hollowed out, scoured clean by the ordeal. I had won the battle, but the war had left its scars. I had lost a family, or rather, I had lost the illusion of a family I'd been clinging to my whole life. I got in my car and just drove. Not home, not yet. I drove to a park overlooking the city and sat on a bench, watching the world go on as if nothing had happened. The days that followed were eerily quiet. I had braced myself for an onslaught of angry phone calls, venomous text messages, a final, desperate attempt to guilt me. But there was nothing, a complete and total silence. It was more unnerving than the attacks. It was the silence of a predator regrouping, of a wound festering. I foolishly allowed myself a flicker of hope that the sheer, public humiliation of the courtroom had been enough, that they would finally accept their defeat and just leave me alone. I was naive. About a week later, I was in my home office, trying to lose myself in my work, when my phone buzzed with an unknown local number. I answered cautiously. "Hello, is this Michael Keller at 123 Oak Street?" A pleasant older woman's voice asked. "Speaking. Who is this?" "My name is Barbara Henderson, dear." I live across the street, in the house with the prize-winning petunias, she said. I apologize for being a nosy neighbor, but there are two women standing on your front lawn, and they're having a very heated argument. One of them is holding a can of what looks like red spray paint. I just thought you should know. My blood ran cold. My heart started hammering against my ribs. What do they look like? I asked, though I already knew the answer with sickening certainty. Well, one is a younger girl in a very flowy sort of dress. The other is a bit older, in a rather loud pink tracksuit. Chloe and Aunt Diana. I'm calling the police, I said, my voice shaking with a fresh wave of rage. Oh, there's no need for that, dear, Mrs. Henderson said with a chuckle. My husband, George, he's a retired Marine, he's already out there. He took his garden rake with him. I believe he's explaining the legal definition of trespassing to them right now. Ah, yes, it seems they're leaving in quite a hurry. I rushed to my living room window just in time to see my aunt's silver SUV peel away from the curb, leaving a small patch of burnt rubber on the asphalt. They had come to my home to vandalize it, to physically scar my property because they had failed to take it legally. Their entitlement had devolved into petty, criminal vindictiveness. The last shred of any familial feeling I might have had for them died in that moment. That was the absolute final straw. They had escalated this beyond the pale. Later that evening, my mother called. For the first time, I didn't ignore it. I answered and put the phone on speaker, placing it on the kitchen counter like a venomous snake I didn't want to touch. What do you want? My voice was flat, dead. Michael? She began, and her voice was already thick with manufactured tears. Michael, how could you do that to us? In front of all those people? We are your family. You humiliated us. I laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Humiliated you? You tried to sue me for everything I've ever worked for based on a complete fantasy, and you're worried about being humiliated? Are you listening to yourself? We were only trying to do what was fair for Chloe, she sobbed. Was it fair for Chloe to come to my house today with Aunt Diana and a can of spray paint? I shot back. The line went silent. A dead, incriminating silence. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally stammered, her voice weak. Yes, you do, I said, my voice dropping to a low, cold whisper. And that's why this is the last conversation we will ever have. You are no longer my mother. Henry is no longer my father. We are done. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not come near my house again. You tried to put a price tag on raising me, so let's call it a business transaction. You sued me for $289,300. You lost. Consider this my final settlement. You get nothing. Not my money, not my house, and not my time. This is the only inheritance you will ever get from me. My complete and total absence from your life. Goodbye. I hung up the phone before she could utter another word. Then, one by one, I blocked their numbers. My mother, my father, Chloe, Aunt Diana. A strange sense of lightness washed over me. The war was finally, truly over. I had won, and the prize was peace. The 6 months that followed the final phone call were like the first days of spring after a long, brutal winter. Slowly, tentatively, life began to return. The oppressive cloud of anxiety that had been my constant companion for so long finally dissipated, and I felt like I could breathe again for the first time in years. The first thing I did was reclaim my house. I had been living in it, but I hadn't been living. Now, I threw myself into making it a home. I spent a weekend painting the sterile white walls warm, welcoming colors. I painstakingly assembled the furniture I had bought but never had the heart to build. I planted a vegetable garden in the backyard, sinking my hands into the rich soil, feeling a sense of connection to the earth, to my land. I hung photos on the walls, not of the family I had lost, but of the family I had chosen. Pictures of Jonathan and me at a ball game laughing. Pictures of landscapes from a work trip to California. A framed letter from my boss, Mr. Grayson. One rainy Saturday, I found myself aimlessly scrolling through the website of the local animal shelter. I told myself I was just looking. An hour later, I was standing in their lobby, filling out adoption paperwork for a scruffy, 1-year-old terrier mix. He had been found wandering the streets, was skinny and timid, but had the biggest, most soulful brown eyes I had ever seen. The shelter had named him Scrappy. I took him home and renamed him Cooper. Cooper filled the quiet corners of my house and my life with a joyful, chaotic energy. He chased squirrels in the backyard, slept at the foot of my bed, and greeted me at the door every day as if I'd been gone for a decade. He was a constant, warm, living presence that demanded nothing but gave everything. He taught me about unconditional love, something I realized I had never truly experienced before. My professional life, freed from the constant distraction of the family drama, flourished. I poured all that saved energy into my work, taking on new projects, mentoring junior analysts. Mr. Grayson noticed. He called me into his office one afternoon, 6 months after the court date. "Michael," he said, getting straight to the point in his typical fashion. "We're restructuring the cybersecurity division. I need a new team lead for threat analysis. It's a significant step up, more responsibility, more oversight, and a significant promotion with a salary to match. The job is yours if you want it." I was speechless. It was the promotion I had been working towards for years. I accepted on the spot, a wide, genuine smile spreading across my face. Walking out of his office, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. My parents had tried to ruin me financially, believing I was already well off. They had no idea what I was truly capable of. I heard bits and pieces about their lives through the family grapevine, mostly from my cousin Matthew. Chloe's GoFundMe, titled "Help an Artist Rebuild Her Life After Family Betrayal," was an abysmal failure. It raised a grand total of $75. A pity donation from Aunt Diana. After word of the lawsuit and her antics got out, her social circle dwindled. The last I heard, she was working as a barista at a Starbucks in the next town over, a far cry from the celebrated creative she had envisioned herself to be. My parents, according to Matthew, had become bitter and isolated. They had alienated the rational members of the family and were left with only the enablers who enjoyed the drama. They had placed a terrible bet and had lost everything: their son, their reputation, and their peace of mind. I felt a surprising lack of emotion at this news. Not glee, not pity, not even anger. Just a quiet, detached nothingness. Their lives and their choices were no longer my concern. My life was here. It was full of meaningful work, a loyal dog, good friends, and a home that was finally, truly a sanctuary. I was building a new legacy, one of my own making. But there was still one ghost from the past left to confront. One final piece of the puzzle that was about to be revealed. My grandfather, Arthur, became the patriarch I never knew I had. Our Sunday dinners became a cherished ritual. He would drive over in his meticulously maintained 1990s Buick, and I would have steaks ready for the grill. We would sit on the back patio I had built, Cooper snoozing at our feet, and we would just talk. He told me stories about his time in the army, about meeting my grandmother, about the challenges of starting his own small construction business after the war. And I told him about my life, about the world of cybersecurity, about my dreams for the future. We were bridging a gap of 30 years, a chasm created by other people's lies. During one of those long, golden afternoons, I finally asked him the question that had been haunting me. "Grandpa," I started trying to find the right words. "Why weren't we ever close when I was a kid? I always assumed you weren't interested in me. Mom and Dad always had an excuse when I'd ask about visiting you. They said you were too busy with your business, or that you were always traveling." He set down his glass of iced tea and looked out over my small green yard. His face, usually so cheerful, clouded over with a deep, ancient sadness. He was quiet for a long time, and I thought maybe I had overstepped. "That's the story they told you?" he finally asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Busy? Traveling?" He shook his head slowly. "Michael, that's a damn lie. For years I tried. Son, I tried so hard." I just stared at him, confused. "When you were 10, he said, his eyes distant, "I bought you a top-of-the-line fishing rod for your birthday. I called to invite you out to the lake with me. Your mother got on the phone and told me you were deathly allergic to lake water and had developed a phobia of fish. She said the gift would give you an anxiety attack. That's not true, I whispered. I love fishing. I know, he said. When you were 15, I stopped by the house to see if you wanted to come help me on a small project. Thought you might like to learn how to use some tools. Your father met me at the door. He told me you were too intellectually gifted for manual labor and that you were busy studying for the SATs, even though it was the middle of summer. He made it clear I was wasting your time. They did that? Every time, he said, his voice laced with a pain that was still raw. Every birthday, every holiday, there was always a reason. You were sick. You were at a friend's house. You had too much homework. After a while, a man gets the message. They didn't want me near you. I think your father was jealous. And your mother, she needed to control the narrative. I didn't fit into it. He reached into his worn leather wallet and carefully extracted a faded, creased photograph. He slid it across the patio table to me. It was a picture of me at 20 years old, wearing the plain black cap and gown of my community college. I was squinting against the bright sun, a slightly awkward but genuinely proud smile on my face as I held up my associate's degree. I don't have any photos from that day, I said, my voice thick. My parents didn't come. They told me they had booked a non-refundable spa weekend for Chloe and couldn't get out of it. I know they didn't, he said softly, but I came. They never knew I was there. I parked a block away and stood in the back, behind the last row of bleachers. I brought my old camera with the big zoom lens. I wasn't going to miss my grandson's graduation. I picked up the photograph, my fingers tracing the outline of my younger self. Tears welled in my eyes and spilled down my cheeks, dripping onto the weathered wood of the table. All those years, I had carried the hurt of their absence that day. I thought no one in the world had cared enough to witness my small, hard-won achievement. But he had been there, a silent, secret guardian watching from the shadows. This was the final, most painful twist of the knife. The cruelty of my parents wasn't just in what they did to me, but in what they stole from me. They hadn't just withheld their own love. They had actively, maliciously gatekept his. They had enforced my loneliness. Holding that old, faded photograph, I finally understood the true depth of their betrayal. It wasn't just about a house or money. It was about a lifetime of stolen moments. It's been 2 years now since that day in court. I'm sitting on my back patio, in the exact spot where my grandfather showed me that photograph. The late afternoon sun is filtering through the leaves of the oak tree I planted last year. Cooper, now a confident and happy dog, is chasing a tennis ball across the lawn. My garden is overflowing with tomatoes and zucchini. My house feels less like a fortress and more like a home, a place filled with the quiet hum of a life well lived. I never heard from my parents or my sister again after that final, cleansing phone call, and I never sought them out. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if they ever feel a moment of regret, a flicker of remorse for the family they so casually destroyed. But I know it's a wasted thought. People like them don't see the wreckage they leave behind. They're too busy looking for someone else to blame for the emptiness of their own lives. Their story continued on a path of their own making, and it's a story I am no longer a part of. My story is here. It's in the solid feel of the ground beneath my feet. It's in the warmth of my dog sleeping on the rug. It's in the sound of my grandfather's laughter as he tells me a story over Sunday dinner. It's in the quiet satisfaction of my work, in the respect of my colleagues, and in the comfort of my friendships. For so long, I thought the house was the goal. I thought owning this property, this tangible asset, was the ultimate victory. But I see now that I was wrong. The house was never the prize. It was the battlefield. The fight for it was the final, necessary war I had to wage to win my own freedom. The real victory wasn't in keeping my name on a deed. It was in the realization that family isn't about blood. It's about respect. It's about support. It's about showing up, even if you have to stand in the back behind the bleachers. It's about choosing to build a life with people who see your worth and celebrate your victories, no matter how small. I learned that you can't choose the family you are born into, but you can and you must choose the family that you build around you. You have the power to walk away from the people who drain your spirit and to build your own walls, not to keep the world out, but to protect the precious, hard-won peace within. The key to my front door doesn't feel heavy anymore. Feels light. It just feels like a key. Because the safety, the security, the sense of belonging I had spent my entire life searching for wasn't in the wood and nails of this house. It was inside me all along. I just had to burn down my old life to find it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? It's a tough road to walk, and I genuinely love to hear about your experience. Share your story in the comments below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I have to share next.